Well, there are three things that if you get me going, I can literally talk about for hours. And those three things are, of course, travel, wine, and a great client experience. And if you're having wine while traveling and having a great client experience, well, that's the trifecta right there. And I don't think I'd ever stop talking about that. But a great client experience is more than just, a handshake or a phone call or what I would call even basic service. You know a client experience when you have one. It's at every touch point, every interaction, every single time that a client thinks about you, they think of you in terms of the experience they have with both you and your team. And that experience will either make you remarkable, so they will tell other people about the positive experience that they've had, or you can go on the other side. You can be unremarkable, and they will tell everybody what a bad experience they've had. And now you're seeing in the wealth management space, you hear a lot about the online platforms, and they allow Canadians to manage their own investments, and they look sleek and impressive, and they talk about all this money you can save. But what is that lacking? It's always lacking that human element that is so important in every business, especially ours. And that's where advisors thrive. That's why consumers go to financial advisors, is because of that human touch, and they actually understand their situation. So doesn't mean that digital is not important. It doesn't mean that you can't have good technology, and that helps with that human interaction. And so as a result, I thought this would be a great topic, that balance between the two, to have my next guest, the divide between digital and in-person experience. So we have Brandon Chapman. And Brandon is, I was actually on his podcast. We talked about him buying a business and succession, and it was great. He's a financial advisor, but he's also an entrepreneur. And he has not only his own advisory practice, but he's a key contributor to a company called AdvisorFlow. So it's a fintech company. It's focused on streamlining the digital onboarding experience for advisors and their clients. So it's talking exactly what I'm talking about, is how do you utilize technology to create a great experience? He's passionate about elevating that digital client experience, helping advisors modernize their practice through thoughtful technology, storytelling, and a strong online presence. So his focus at AdvisorFlow is very similar to my own, which is helping advisors with their business. Right? He has a whole practice management series, which luckily I've been a guest on, and it spotlights industry leaders who bring deep insight into their craft. Their product roadmap is shaped by the feedback that they get from advisors, and it really revolves around the same thing that I talk about all the time, which is that great client experience. So Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Chris. Always appreciate our conversations, and I've listened to probably 8 of your episodes over the last few months, and it's probably one of my favorite podcasts in the advisor community at the moment, so thank you for all the work you do.
All right, another listener. That's 2, so that's fantastic. So let's start with the basics. Tell us your story. How did you get here?
Well, I grew up in rural BC, which basically means lots of sunshine and outdoor time. I was in Air Cadets for 7 years, joined the Canadian Forces. That taught me a lot about discipline, deportment, and process, which in hindsight was actually great training for building a business in financial services. I moved to Vancouver for university, and that's where I realized I was more of an entrepreneur and needed to start something. While there, I was hosting concerts, community events with friends. I realized that there's a huge power in community building. I met my ex-girlfriend, who's now my wife, just before she left for law school. And while she went to law school, I started building my advisory practice. So early days, I was living in this crappy basement suite just to keep costs down. And I managed to survive those first 5 years with grit and a lot of Mr. Noodles. And then, basically I started building models early. So I got fund companies competing to be a part of the book, and clients got great returns, which that helped me grow the book fast. Ultimately I just was, fortunate enough to be given the opportunity by Greg Taylor, Freedom 55 Financial, being a fresh grad out of university, and the opportunity to start building from scratch.
Well, you have the classic entrepreneurial story, which is, you found something you like to do, You had to suffer the beginning years. Everyone forgets about those suffering beginning years. I also remember when I told my father that I was going to be open my own company. He's like, "Oh, great!" He's like, "Now you get to work half days. You just have to pick which 12 hours they're going to be."
That's so true.
So yeah, you must have went through that.
That's why I didn't mind having that crappy place to live, because I was only there to sleep, right? I was at the office or downtown, I was at events, it didn't matter. Although COVID hit, and then it was really rough. So luckily my wife was coming back and we bought our house at that point in time, because I was spending way more time in that basement suite than I ever thought I would.
That's true. You don't want something like COVID have, and you're stuck in a bad place. So, but you progressed. You saw a need out there in the marketplace, and especially because you have the both the hats on. You're not only, as they say, was that one of the companies? Not only do I love I love the product so much I bought the company type of thing, but in this case, you saw a need in your own practice, and so. One of the things that, and this is what I wanted to get into in this podcast, is there's a real disconnect between both the digital and in-person client experience. Like you have the traditional old school, sort of what I call in the office client experience, where someone physically comes in and there's the physical aspects of that experience. But now younger advisors such as yourself are coming in and utilizing digital properties and digital tools to enhance that experience. So what are advisors getting right, and what do you think advisors are getting wrong with this balance between those two things?
Well, first of all, the in-person experience is still the most important part. So I definitely don't think that advisors should spend less on that experience. And I certainly am not. I purchased an office space downtown Vancouver, and I look forward to inviting you down for a mock client experience to get your feedback on that. But I think the biggest opportunity / problem is that many in the advisor community still think that digital means a PDF with your logo. When in fact, the client experiences have shifted. Sorry, the client expectations have shifted.
Sure. Yeah. It's a different world out there.
Yeah, like when you're interacting with Amazon or Apple, Uber, the reason why people come back to those brands is because it feels personalized, it's fast, and it's seamless. And if the digital experience of working with an advisor is not that with one firm, and it is with another, that's definitely a reason to consider switching. When historically, if you're comparing crappy versus more crappy, it's they're not going to switch for that reason. But I think that's really the opportunity in financial services associated with advisors over the next 5 or 10 years.
Well, I think you make a really good point there, is that one of the challenges is we just look internally. You don't look at other advisors and you compare yourself, or you do compare yourself with the other advisors, or even what you used to do. But the real challenge is comparing yourself to other industries and the digital experience that we get there. And to your point, Amazon is so prevalent in our lives. Social media is so prevalent in our lives. Even things like Instacart and other online, and that becomes the standard that consumers judge everything, and then they come to the wealth industry, which for the most part is still rather rudimentary as it relates to utilizing digital properties and digital tools. So, what do you think that the advisors are afraid of?
I don't necessarily think it's the advisor's fault. I actually think that the biggest problem is about how decisions are made in financial services. And a lot of times it's made from some folks sitting in a boardroom in Canada, in Toronto or London, Ontario, who are so disconnected from the client experience that when they make decisions about technology, they're not actually thinking about the end client experience. They think they're solving problems, but in fact, they're actually creating problems. And so I've seen time and time again being in the industry, and this is kind of why I had to start something, because I realized that this is how decisions are made, and every time they make a big decision, it falls on its face. And if half the advisors don't even use the tech because they run big blocks and they're not concerned about learning the new tech, it's guys like me and advisors that are growing quickly that are needing to figure out, well, how am I going to actually do this?
Again, another good point. All great experiences, whether digital or otherwise, start with the client. And a lot of times is that they start with the manufacturing side. So in other words, let's design it and then go find clients to sell it to. But if there's one thing that certainly I learned from Steve Jobs is you start with the client and you walk through their experience to the end, not start with the end and work it back to what I'm selling to clients. And it actually sounds like that's exactly what you've done in your own practice. So, you know, how can I guess advisors change their mindset around that? What process did you go through to see this is a need, and here's what I'm going to develop to help not only my practice, but if it works so well for me, I can do it for other people. So how did that thought process come across?
Well, one quick story before I answer that question, Chris, I think it'll set it up pretty well. I was recently at an industry conference and a financial services exec dismissed the software I had built, saying, oh, it's just a basement project, which I found kind of hilarious because I was wondering if this guy had ever used Google or Amazon, which also started as basement projects.
Didn't all software companies start as basement projects? Like all the companies that we buy stocks of these days?
Exactly. So, for me, a lot of my clients work in tech. So if you look at my practice, it's called SaaS Wealth Insurance because we literally work with tech professionals and business owners. And so when I was sending them PDFs and Word docs in my first few years, they were literally replying back to me like, are you joking? Like, why is there not a cloud experience? And my answer was there isn't one available. That was the best answer I could give them. Right. Until one of my clients who was wrapping up his program at UBC, he's in this data visualization program, smart guy. He's been at Goldman Sachs and Citi. He said, well, I got a few months. Why don't I whip you up a basic version of what this might look like? And so that was the first iteration of AdvisorFlow back at the tail end of 2019. And I knew quite a few advisors in my office. So I said, hey guys, this thing's free. Give it a go. Give us some feedback. And so that was really version 1 of the product. And then I realized during COVID, this is a full-time business. So I actually added some staff, invested some money behind the thing, got a team of developers to help out building it. And we've been iterating the product ever since. And we've been growing across the country.
That's fantastic. And what has the client's reaction been? What's their input?
Well, they've been just as helpful with providing feedback actually as advisors. So because I manage a block of about 200 clients, I get feedback on a regular basis about what they like or don't like about the software, just as advisors are receiving feedback from their clients. So it's been definitely like an iterative experience, but because I'm so in touch with the client experience, it's actually been a huge advantage, I would say, compared to software companies that perhaps are maybe VC backed and really trying to aggressively grow revenue and are once again disconnected from the client experience.
Right. Has there been any like sort of aha moments where, you know, what you thought and a path you were going, and then based on the actual usage, whether it's a, you know, advisor or a client, you're like, I never actually thought of it that way and changed it. Have you had any of those?
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. It's basically, I'm definitely not the smartest person that's providing input anymore, right? Like I thought I was smart, but there's way smarter people out there that think about these things better than I can. And like that's why I have a team, right? I've got a UX designer, I've got a software development person, a security person. Like I'm a financial advisor through and through. Like when I'm in conversations with clients, the way I approach those conversations, I wouldn't say I'm cheap, but I would say I'm like, I value a dollar and the way we spend it.
Right.
I'll spend money on a great client experience, just like I'm sure you do, Chris. But I don't like spending money on a poor experience.
Exactly. So you get now you have a whole bunch of people that you interact, and you know, one of the main topics we're talking about is mixing the physical client experience with the digital client experience. Who do you see getting it right, and why are they getting it right?
So in Canada, there's not a ton that I would raise that are running a great practice and running a great digital experience. There's many that I would say are good on social media and then maybe run an okay practice from what I've seen. But in the US, it's completely different. So there's two names that come to mind, Thomas Kopelman and Joshua Brown, both running massive blocks, great on social, great client experience from what I've seen. And I think we in Canada have a lot to learn. And these guys, they lead with storytelling, they share real advice, and they show up consistently. but they have that digital process down. And I think that's where we in Canada have a huge opportunity.
Well, I think to your point, I've seen it on all sides, and I live in the States, so I can also see how the difference. And generally, they say, and especially in the wealth business, we're about 10 years ahead in the U.S. to the Canadian marketplace. But to your point, the use of social media down here in financial advisory practice is so much more advanced, I would say, than you see. You see pockets of brilliance, don't get me wrong, here and there. But you can probably appreciate this, that as a consumer, when you're going to go and get financial advice from someone, let's say they were referred to you, I know what I would do. I don't know about you, but the first thing I would do is I would Google you. And I would see what your online presence looks like and social media looks like. And, to your point, what is your digital experience like and how can you describe it? And if it wasn't what I was expecting or wasn't up to par, I would have to, ponder that move. I also use an example. At one time I was living in Key West for a bit during the pandemic, and I had a toothache. And I use this as an example of why social media and why technology is so important. So what would you do if you had a toothache in a place that you generally didn't live?
Dentist near me.
Right. You just go on Google. And by the way, in case you were wondering, there are 5 dentists in Key West. And 3 of them have websites that look like their cousin put them together, like it's or maybe nephew, like very rudimentary, not very good. So you can eliminate them right away. The other one was good, but one of them was outstanding. One of them would be like yours. They had videos, they had interaction, they had podcasts, they had different newsletters depending on what you were looking for. Who do you think I chose?
The one that you got a feel for the experience before you even saw them.
Exactly. And by the way, I didn't even look at qualifications. That occurred to me as I was going to the office. I'm like, I didn't even look at if any of these guys are actually qualified to be dentists. But that's the power of what you're talking about. And so you're seeing this in real time. And so the next thing that you have to worry about, I guess, is the younger generations. Like the older generation are still fine with the client experience, the physical, what I'm going to call the physical. How are you connecting with that younger generation?
Well, first of all, millennials value authenticity, asking questions, and telling real stories, just like the older generations. Just they expect that, I would say, before they meet you. And that's the big difference, is just like you talked about with your dentist, that's the same experience that I would say millennials take with every professional service provider that they may choose to do business with. And I don't know, the analogy I like to use, Chris, is like, think about when you walk into an Apple store. It's
right.
Clean, the people are presentable, they're not trying to sell you, they're going to educate you on how the technology works and how it might solve whatever problem you have. And then once you have that product, it makes sense to get additional products because of how smooth everything works and integrates. And then it's
right.
really difficult to leave because they've made the client experience for becoming a client and staying a client so dang easy.
Right.
So the way I look at the younger clients, a lot of advisors are like, oh, I'm not going to bother. They just want to do it yourself and buy an index fund, or they want to buy and trade stocks. I think that's actually great. I think you should empower them to do that and say, yeah, you should definitely try that, because failing is the best way to learn. And so when people don't have a whole lot of money, that's when they have a lot of time typically. And so it's a great time for them to play around, lose a bunch of money, and realize that, okay, this might not be the best use of my time.
Right.
Stock picking is actually a heck of a lot harder than people think it is. Planning is so much more important. And that's where, I know, as you know, our industry, the product is planning. The product is not investment products. And that's where I'd say the largest opportunity is in Canada, is for advisors to all focus on the planning. The products are second or third part of the conversation. And those younger clients are going to eat that up because they've heard from their parents, oh, my investment guy, my advisor manages my portfolio. So in their mind, that's what they think the advisor is. And so when you come in with a planning first approach and you don't even talk about investments, you sort of catch them off guard to some extent.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. And what you're saying really holds true. And if you want a competitive advantage in the business, believe it or not, providing a financial plan is a competitive advantage. And why I say that is they did a survey not that long ago of people who had over 500,000 of investable assets. So they took a group of people 1,000 people who had over 500,000 of investable assets and asked how many received a written financial plan prior to investing. And do you know what the number was?
Is this the JD Power survey? I think it was 9%.
9%. So, which means 91% did not get a financial plan. That would be like me going to a tire store and not getting any tires. I go to a financial advisor primarily to get a financial plan. And the top advisors that I know in this industry, and I know quite a few, they all have one thing in common. They lead with the plan. To your point, they first establish why they're investing, and then they would go through the investments. To your point, like the Apple, I want to solve your problem first, and then I can show you which products would probably solve your problem the best. So I think to your point, the younger generation needs to realize that it's probably not as easy. And we're seeing this in the do-it-yourself platforms where people sort of, they get to a certain point and they're like, ooh, now it's dangerous. Now if I lose money, now I'm really, when I had 10,000, I wasn't really worried. Now they got 300,000, 10% is 30 grand. I really should talk to somebody about this. And I think that's what you're seeing as long as you can combine that digital experience as well.
Well, that's the accountability partner, right? It's somebody who you can say, hey, you said X, Y, Z, and this is what happened, or this is what didn't happen. Like Questrade or Wealthsimple, they're just saying, we give you access to products and we're cheap. But that doesn't provide peace of mind when the market tanks. And a generic email that explains what's going on in the market is not going to help anyone feel better when they just want to talk to someone who cares.
Right, and can explain it to them, like what is the effect? We're going through all this tariff stuff right now, and it lends to emotion and a deep emotion. And people make bad decisions when they make it on emotion. So it gives, to your point, a sounding wall that can prevent people from actually hurting themselves and getting out of the market at the wrong time and getting back into the market at the wrong time. So I think we're seeing that also right now. Right? We're seeing it as we speak. This phenomenon is occurring.
Yeah, well, I'd add on to that, Chris, and say the younger generation values control because they may have felt that their parents did not have control. And so my view is to position our firm as, well, you don't actually need us to buy investment products, but you might want us. And particularly as you raise a family, as you grow in your career and you realize that there's a ton of things you can spend your time on, but where are you best suited and where are you going to get the most value for that time?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point. So I'm going to change directions a little bit because when I was on your podcast, we talked about succession planning and the fact that you are somebody's succession and you have bought a big business and going through that process with them. And so being part of entrepreneurs, of course, is not only starting a company, not only having innovations, but it's also sometimes growing through acquisition. So maybe tell us a little bit about that experience and what you've learned from it.
I've learned a ton. Both you and Kirk, what I noticed in the two of you is you bring humility, but deep wisdom. So even though you know a lot, you don't come off as someone that's a know-it-all. And that's, I think, an issue in our industry is that ego or know-it-all syndrome, which can sometimes absorb, can take away from the overall experience. But Kirk has been a fantastic resource for me as I've been growing as an advisor. So I've been in the industry only 10 years, but over the last 5 years, seeing how Kirk approaches retirement planning, how does he speak to clients during ups and downs, how does he construct portfolios, it's ultimately been a bit of a masterclass for me to allow me to have confident conversations with people in their 60s and 70s with large portfolios, as opposed to just the people in their 30s and 40s who have a decent sized portfolio, but we're still a ways away from me managing all of their money. And there's a lot of trust and I would say risk in that, right?
Yeah, I was going to say absolutely. And to have that mentor to bring you through it. And again, your business has grown in leaps and bounds because of that, I would imagine.
Yeah, like we basically doubled size, right? Like I organically grew it to like my practice to a decent size, but this really, I would say, changed the demographics of my clientele. And also, I think gives us a little bit more weight. I find when my block was 10 million, like no one really cared. But now I find that it's, dealers want to work with me or our firm, and different companies want to set up meetings with our team. But the fun part for me has been the team building aspect of it. So before, when I was the solo advisor, now we've got 4 advisors, we've got admin, we've got marketing people. It's interesting, like the tack that we're on, if we kind of keep doing what we're doing, versus before where I was limited by capacity. But I'd say, Chris, that's where the software piece helps a ton, because I can standardize and ensure that everyone is meeting our compliance obligations.
Well, I think not only meeting your compliance obligation, but your scalability of that client experience. Like, again, the physical, without utilization of technology and, things like AdvisorFlow and things that just automate those things, it's very hard to deal with a business of 300 clients or plus. Like, you need that scalability, and every business that's going to succeed will need scalability at some point.
Well, Chris, like you focused on the client experience at IPC and you won, right? And I'm just trying to do something similar by bridging the digital experience with the in-person experience.
Right. And I think that's what's necessary. Like what I call the next big leap is exactly that, is because so much of our interaction is digital these days. So you have to make that, as I said, I believe the next big leap in this business is going to be the combination of the two, and using and utilizing technology and again, tools like you've developed to streamline those businesses so that you can have deeper relationships with clients, can you have better understanding of what they need, and you can really, again, focus on that remarkable experience that we all crave.
Being open-minded has never hurt me in business. Like being willing to learn and realizing that I don't have it all figured out has always been worth it.
Yeah, and you're living proof of that. So, my final question is, what's next? Where do you see yourself, and where do you want to go in the next 3 years?
So, Chris, my daughter Daenerys, she's 20 months old. So I'm, learning how to be a dad and raise my little one. We're opening a flagship office downtown Vancouver, so like that's going to be fun and interesting to manage that client experience. I'm really focused on trying to create a premium client experience. So like right now we're trying to decide between an espresso or some fancy coffee machine that my wife's office uses. But yeah, I'm going to continue to double down on software. So we'll probably raise some money, likely not from VC, but probably from the advisor community. Many of the teams that are already using the software.
Makes sense.
But longer term, the next 3 to 4 years, there will be dealer integration with AdvisorFlow. And that's going to be really like a new way of working, because there's going to be no manual entry from the first time data is entered to when it flows through to opening up investment accounts. So that's going to be a huge win. And yeah, like industry wise, I would say the firms that are going to win over the next 5 years will probably do it through acquisition. But the ones that are going to dominate over the next 10 will do it through a client experience.
Right. I would 100% agree with that. Like you're seeing the trends, as I said, in real time now. So that's fantastic. Now, of course, you've listened to the show, so you know what's next is my rapid fire questions. You pulled it on me when I did your podcast, and I was like, what are the questions? I'm like, I don't even know. Oh yeah, you asked me about hockey, and I'm like, hockey, man. Wayne Gretzky's the only hockey player I know. So
I had to keep you on your toes a little bit, Chris.
Exactly. Well, that one certainly did. I had to really think about that one. So I got 3. You know how it goes. I'm going to ask you in the first one that pops in your head, and I'm going to take one from yours. What's the best book that you've ever read?
Yeah, so I'd say The Infinity Game by Simon Sinek. It's really shifted how I think about business. Instead of playing to win in the short term, it's more about building something sustainable with purpose. And so that mindset's what's driven my advisory practice and AdvisorFlow. It's not about trying to win the quarter, but we're trying to win the next generation of advisors and clients.
I love it. And one of my favorite books as well. What is the best advice that you've ever received?
To slow down and take my time. I used to be very, I would say, quick to make decisions. My wife is very focused on thinking fast. but making the decision slow. So you can make the decision in your mind, but you don't need to say it right away, and then sleeping on it and coming back the next day. And that's definitely been smart. My wife's a lawyer, by the way, so she's a little more conservative by nature.
But also another good book, by the way, and it is very good advice, because we tend to do it. And I think some people would say Trump needs to do that as well, but I'm not going to make any political statements. That being said, the last question I have for you is, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as someone that cares, not someone that's just focused on making a buck, but somebody that truly was focused on doing the right thing. My wife brought me back to faith over the last 5 years, and that's been, I'd say, a transformational journey in my own life. And yeah, so basically it's just somebody that cares and somebody that's present.
And present. I love it. So that's good. So in summary, I've learned a lot with you today, talking about the client experience, talking about how to match up the physical client experience with the digital client experience, how to use tools like AdvisorFlow to help that end-to-end process and make that client experience something that is remarkable for clients, and also something that will help you scale your business to the next stage. And again, you have the great entrepreneurial story of starting, working in a basement apartment, building it up, all by organic, seeing a need in the marketplace, starting technology that will help you in that need, and then actually doing an acquisition and growing your business through that. So you've really had all facets of the entrepreneurial life. So thank you so much for being on the show. So Brendan, where can people find you? And if people want to know more about AdvisorFlow and how it helps their business, how would they go about that?
LinkedIn's the best place. I'm on there every day, and just to learn from other advisors and connect with interesting people like yourself. I think that's how we originally got connected.
Yeah, actually, it was, yeah. It works. See, social media works.
There's a lot of noise out there, but you find some gems, right? So yeah, LinkedIn's been clutch. So I'd love to chat with anyone who wants to chat about client experience. So
great, yeah. So just look them up. As I said, it's a pretty interesting software, and I think people should really take a look at it if you want to streamline your practice. With that, Brendan, any final words for our audience?
Just thanks to everyone who's helped me get to this point. So, Freedom 55, the Canada Life organization, has been, I would say, invaluable to where I am today. And whether it's Greg Taylor or Zumi McGruer, you've just gone through an acquisition with Canada Life, and there's a lot of great people in that organization. So
absolutely,
yeah. But yeah, and then to all your listeners, hopefully this has been valuable, and keep striving for excellence and building the best practice you can.
All right. Brandon Chapman of AdvisorFlow, thank you very much for being part of the show.
Thanks for having me on, Chris.